Welcome back to the Bigfoot Manifesto, where progressive politics, cryptid folklore, and the belief systems we're told not to question all gather around the same campfire. Well, there's a story many Americans grow up with before they're old enough to question it. That faith is chosen, that belief is voluntary, that Christianity is just a personal relationship, not a cultural system, not a power structure, and definitely not indoctrination. But when you start the lessons in childhood, when doubt is framed as sin, when obedience is called virtue, that stops looking like faith and starts looking like training. Today's episode is a cynical, satirical examination of Christian indoctrination, how it works, why it's so effective, and why so many people spend years unlearning ideas they've never consciously chose in the first place. Bigfoot myths are optional. Religious myths get installed early. So let's welcome James Aames to the Bigfoot Manifesto. James has written a book that I found really interesting called How to Become a Non-Christian. And we're going to talk about religion, Christianity, indoctrination, all kinds of fun stuff. You know, not the fun myths or things like Bigfoot, but we'll see what we can do here. So welcome to the podcast, James.
Hi, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so I want to get started and, the thing I want to touch on is you and I have talked off camera about this, but Christian belief doesn't spread primarily through conversion. It spreads, through early normalization. When your parents are Christians, you become Christian. Your
Right.
parents are Muslim, you become a Muslim. It's sort of default until at some point you make a decision not to use those as your core beliefs. So, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this point.
Yeah. What you just said is 100% correct. And I will point out, however, that atheists occur all around the world for some weird reason.
They do.
Yeah, I was raised in a very, very Christian family. And coincidentally, when I was 8 years old, I used my 8-year-old brain to decide to become a Christian. Basically, I was just going along with my programming. And I remained a Christian, kind of spotty at times, but I remained a Christian until I was 33. And that was a very, very difficult transition to come out of it at that late age.
Well, I mean, you're blowing apart your core values of what you've believed in. And one of the things I always say is, like, when you look at religion, they're on shaky legs when you're talking about, should I believe this? To me as a child, I'll get into that later. We've discussed that about how I gave up on religion the first time I got thrown to Sunday school. So,
but good for you.
So at what point does teaching values become indoctrination?
And that's a very good question, because little kids do not know the difference between teaching and indoctrination. They cannot tell the difference. It's indoctrination when you don't have evidence for what you're teaching the kids. And alongside this comes a very common teaching in Christian denominations called the 414 window, which is saying that between the ages of 4 and 14, that's when you want to get them. That's when you want to get them to convert to Christianity, so you can start filling their head with all this stuff. Because once they're 14, their critical thinking starts to kick in. They start to evaluate things before they decide to believe them. But prior to that, after the age 4, because at the age 4, we get what's called the theory of mind, which is that you understand that other people have their own brain and they have different opinions than you, and I am unique. And then they also understand things like, right and wrong and trust and authority, and metaphors and things like that. So after 4 years old, a person can grasp the concept of God and that I need to submit myself to God. And that's when they get them. By far, the vast preponderance of Christians, adult Christians in the United States, became a Christian in that 4 to 14 window. Only about 3 or 4% of adult American Christians converted to Christianity as an adult. So they have this, they put forth this idea that they're evangelizing and spreading the gospel throughout the country and that people are converting to Christianity. They're not. They're being brainwashed as little kids. And another side note that Christians should be aware of is that 17% of American adult Christians migrated here from another country. So if Christians wanted to become a minority in this country, the first thing they should do is prevent migration.
It's true. It really is.
right?
And it's talking about the indoctrination. You know who I blame heavily for this is that David and Goliath claymation thing. That was
Oh
a
my
real hook.
God.
What a sucker. They really tried to hook in with that one, didn't they? Like Sunday
Yeah, they
mornings.
did.
Oh, what's this? Oh, claymation. Okay. It's not as cool as it looks.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and so like, Sunday school, for example, tell a story. My mom was great. She's from Italy, Catholic family, but when she tried to stick me in Sunday school, he screamed and cried till she came and picked me up, but she never made me go back again. And then of course I embarrassed her once in church. She took me and the priest was doing his, drink the blood of Christ thing. And I yelled out, "Oh, that's disgusting." And so I was an immediate embarrassment to her. So, but
How old were you?
I was like 5, I think 5 or 6,
Oh, man.
something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
So because like when I was a kid, blood really freaked me out. So there was nothing worse than that. There's nothing worse someone could have said. Because my sister even used to yell blood to me because it would freak me out when I was a little kid. I don't know why, but so yeah, they try and rope you in the Sunday school thing. And I remember kids teasing me after the next day when I went back to school, regular school after Sunday school. I was like the oddball for not wanting to be in Sunday school. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. As Christians always say, "Oh, we're being persecuted in this country and this and that." And I always felt it was the opposite. Things like I didn't want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, things like that. You looked at for an oddball for not believing in those things.
Well, good on you, and I hope a lot more people are oddballs like you.
Yeah. I seem to know them all.
My base personality is, hey, I just want everybody to get along. I just want everything to be cool and everybody to be happy. So I was kind of like a pleaser growing up and oh, you want me to become a Christian? Okay. And then much later in life, the weight and the enormity of that horrible decision really started ruining my life, basically.
Well, when we talk about Christianity too, the one thing that scares me is things like that: drink the blood of Christ, eat his body. It's like, all right, we're on to the cannibalism thing now. So when you look in that book, I mean, it's so much of it's fear-based. Religion drives you fear-based to believe, or you're not going to heaven, or you're going to be stuck in purgatory for thousands of years. That stuff to me is scary. It's like, I don't need that.
Yeah, it's all about fear. And it's ironic because the Bible says they're not given to a spirit of fear, but in fact, that is what it's completely revolving around, is fear. And once you're 14 and your critical thinking does start kicking in, if you're already a Christian and you've been indoctrinated with these horrible ideas, there are so many fears that kick in that prevent you from getting out of Christianity that it's really a sad state of affairs. And in my book, How to Become a Non-Christian, I talk about 22 distinct fears. There's probably more than that, but I listed 22 different fears that people have when confronting the idea of leaving their faith. And they are gut-wrenching fears. So it's a very big deal. Fear is why Christianity survives.
I think that it's in a lot of different religions. Fear is always a driving force to keep you there. And like I said, I mean, it's all based on some real fragile, evidence. So, you know where I go with that. But so one good question I have is, why is doubt framed as mortal failure rather than curiosity? That's a good one.
Yeah, doubt is the thing that you're not supposed to do as Christians. And it comes down to epistemology. And Christianity's its first and its initial failure is epistemological. It's how do you get your truth? How do you decide what is true? And with Christians, it's through divine revelation. Simply obey God, whatever he says. And it's apparently in the Bible, right? There used to be a plaque that would be on the walls of Christian friends that I would grow up with, and the plaque said, "God said it, I believe it, that settles it." Just saying those words is triggering to me now. But it's like they disengage their critical thinking. And doubt is the thing that comes from Satan. He's trying to pull you away from your faith because he wants you to go to hell, right? And this applies to MAGA too.
Oh yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, yeah. You're supposed to
Yeah.
believe on faith, right? And instead of
Yeah.
God, it's just Donald Trump. And so
Yeah.
whatever he says, you're just supposed to listen to him. And Christians will pay lip service to testing your faith. Go ahead, test your faith. God will prove, whatever. But it's bullshit. They don't really want you to test your faith. And if you do, if you test your faith and it fails and you decide to leave the faith, then you have to leave this entire tribe. You're getting kicked out of the tribe, which from a human standpoint is like equates to the fear of death, right? So yeah, there's a lot of fear around that. And doubt is one of the biggest ones that keeps you in the faith.
Well, that's it. They believe it. They believe it. The argument they always give, they're like, well, prove God doesn't exist. I'm like, the method doesn't work that way. You have this hypothesis that there's this God, giant, omnipotent being in the universe somewhere. So the onus is on you to prove that exists. It's not on me to disprove something that isn't there, doesn't exist.
No.
Not how scientific method works.
Not at all.
But it doesn't work on them. But it's the same thing with MAGA, same thing. Like you read him, anything he posts, they just say it's true. I mean, it's like, yeah, well, he said it. It's got to be true. I was even laughing, like the new thing in have you been following that case in Minnesota with the child care centers? So there's a YouTube influencer, Nick Shirley, and I didn't even know who he was. And some of my friends who follow stuff knew who he was. But I looked him up. I'm like, wait, so this 20-year kid who's not a journalist, nothing, just posted a video and you accept that as truth?
Right.
I mean, it's just, he did a little editing. It's stupid.
Yeah.
But I was watching all the MAGA people were like, oh, look at this guy. He proved it. The Somalis are ripping us off for millions and millions. It's just so insane. I was like, who is this guy? I'm like, so this guy said it, so it's got to be true?
Right.
How low? I mean, we've set the bar really low in this country at this point, but come on.
Right. And people forget that profound claims require profound evidence.
Yep.
Right. You're going to say something really like earth-shattering like that, you better have damn good evidence. And of course they don't.
Of course,
but because it confirms the bias, people don't really, their requirement for evidence lowers quite a bit when it confirms their bias. So
yeah, exactly.
And belief, by the way, just to go back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, like Christians say, yeah, they believe in God, but belief is not binary. It is not an on or off thing. There are degrees of belief. And I think we're finding this now with MAGA people, that their degree of belief is starting to erode, right? Like, I believe 100% that in an hour and a half, the sun is going to set, right?
Yeah.
But I almost certainly believe, I'm almost certain that that comet that's going around the sun is actually a comet, right? That 3-eye Atlas thing, right? Pretty sure it's just a comet, but it's kind of weird, right? So, and I'm pretty sure, now it's lower, but I'm pretty sure that the Dodgers are going to make it to the postseason next year.
Yeah.
So there's degrees of belief, right?
There is. Yes, I agree.
And it's not just I believe in God or I don't believe in God. I think a lot of people say they believe in God when really they only kind of believe it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they're just suspending their disbelief, right?
Yeah.
Because our brains, belief is an output of our brains. We can't choose what we believe, right? If I tried to tell you that dogs were disguising themselves as cats, and so all the cats you see are actually dogs in disguise, I'm not going to be able to convince you of that, right? You're not going to be able to choose to believe that. You just can't. Right? So Christians can't choose to believe in God. I don't think they have. And I think a lot of them are simply suspending their disbelief. That is something we can do consciously. So it's a big difference. And so when people say they believe, there's a lot packed into that word.
There is. And, we'll get into some of that a little bit more later. I think I have some thoughts on that too. But
okay.
I wanted to move on to another segment, and I'll just lead it off with this statement, that I thought of was, Christianity, it's not just telling stories, it's managing people's behaviors. And, going off of that premise, I want to start, my first question for you is, why does Christianity rely so heavily on guilt and shame? I mean, honestly, as me growing up Catholic family, like, it's funny, my friend Marianne Murphy, who's known me forever, she goes, you still have that in you with the guilt and shame stuff. She goes, you still carry that with you, even though you've never believed. Yep. I'm like, she's got a point, Yep. Was it that? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it could be.
Those weird beliefs, man, they leave a mark.
Yeah.
Christianity does rely on guilt and shame quite a bit. And most religions do. And I hate giving religions a pass, but I don't think they did this intentionally. It's due to a thing called memetics. There's a lot of religious memes and that are kind of glommed together with any one religion, and the ones that last are the ones that are sticky and spreadable. It makes the religion more spreadable, right? A counterexample would be like the Shakers. Have you heard of the Shakers?
Of course, yeah. Oh, yeah. They're the Shaker
Right.
village right by me here in Massachusetts right now.
Do you know how many people are in that village?
None.
3.
Oh, is there 3? I thought they were all gone. There's 3 left.
Well, according to my research, the Shakers are down to 3 people.
3? I thought they were all gone.
Their religion that made it unspreadable.
Yeah.
You were not allowed to have sex for any reason ever, period, end of story. So they didn't grow biologically, and they weren't really able to convince people to become Shakers. So now there's no Shakers, right? No one wants to be a Shaker. But the opposite happens with the really popular and successful religions. And and guilt and shame are 2 of the things that make them very sticky. Once you feel guilt, the antidote is offered by the religion. And then people get into a negative error loop. Like they commit a sin, let's say they masturbate, and then they feel guilty for it because they were taught that masturbation is self-defilement. And then they ask Jesus for forgiveness, and they place their tormented soul at his feet once more, and then they feel better, and then rinse and repeat, right? So that keeps this cycle going, which is very, very good for the religion. But I don't think it was part of a devious plan. If you look at the history of Christianity, there were many splintered variations of sects of Christianity for thousands of years after the time of Christ. And it originated, of course, after international trade routes had been established, but before the printing press. It's a very important period of time that made a very fertile mimetic garden, right? Because the Christian myth would spread from village to village by word of mouth. So there was every imaginable different variation of Christianity because people are nuts and they don't remember things right? But what they would remember would be the really sticky memes, the aspects like guilt and shame when one salesman would go from one village to the next and he'd be like, hey, you know how they worship this guy Jesus over there and they pray to him, and because we are all born sinners and he died on the cross, blah, blah, blah. And this redemption theme is really like, it resonates with people. So those aspects stuck to the religion. Oh, and then the printing press was invented around the time that Rome was trying to get control over everything. Luther was off doing his thing. And so they used the printing press to codify the doctrine. And then anything outside of this is now heresy, and we're going to burn you at the stake. So the mimetic garden basically slowed way down, and changes stopped happening. So, but those guys maybe were a little devious when they were deciding how to codify the faith, because they were assholes. And when they were writing it all down, they realized, guilt and shame, these are good things. We need to keep these. So there probably was a little bit of intent, but for the most part, it grew organically. And that's how it happens in other religions as well.
Well, I think we're going to go do a workshop with the Shakers and see if I can kick them back into action. I got some easy ideas to grow that church.
If you guys would just change this one thing.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I'm gonna go put a workshop on over there. Fair trade for some furniture. So one question, you could a term that, and you can help define this, but like, how does the idea of loving authority discourage resistance?
Oh, wow. This is endemic in Christianity.
Yeah, and it's a term I've seen, and I just don't not something I've dealt
there's
with,
always a charismatic leader, and everybody loves them so much. And like, why would he ever lie to me? And they just see this person, they enshrine this person. Usually it's human nature to do it. And then, you don't want to resist against that person because you want to be part of the tribe. It's very much part of our human instinct to just kind of go along with what the tribe is doing, except for people like you.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, I remember in college, Augustine's City of God and all this, and the discussion of free will, which I think that's a lot. I think that's part of a lot of what Luther had against the Catholic Church too, was maybe the free will part of it. Because basically what Augustine was saying is you don't have free will. Everything's sort of preordained, which I think it's pretty ridiculous. It's like free will, but only if you choose correctly.
Right.
So, I mean, I
Makes no
just,
sense.
I always found it like that book weird too, because I think Augustine even talks about like, whistling, farting tunes out of his ass too, or something. So there was a lot to unpack in that. It's one of those books that give you in philosophy to read. It's like, well, read this. And I'm like, is he really talking about whistling tunes out of his ass? Well, okay. But anyways, so yeah, the free will thing, I just I don't see it either way. I just don't see it. If like one omnipotent God is, ruling over every segment of your life, I mean, I
I
don't
think
get
free
it.
will is an interesting question, but I also separate that entirely from whether religion is true or not, because it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. I think you're right, because you look at the all powerful deity thing, and like polytheism's so much more interesting. I'd rather have a bunch of different gods. It seemed a lot cooler. It really is. It's much more interesting than
Works
one.
a lot better.
Yeah, and they're better stories, and we'll get into stories later because we'll talk about how some of this propagated. But speaking of that, especially how we were just touching on the Trump era and everything, and the rise of fascism here. So, how does religious training spill into politics and culture? What are you seeing there?
Oh man, that's a very huge topic.
Yes, that's why I'm going to give it a lot of time here.
Religion spills into politics because religion trains people to believe profound claims without evidence, right? You have to do that in order to be a Christian. You have to believe that God sent his son, blah, blah, blah. We're born sinners, the whole redemption thing. It's like there's no way to prove any of that. So you have to believe all of that is true without any actual evidence of it being true. And then there are more and more like escalating levels of belief that people of faith are often required to take. And once you've conditioned your mind to just believe things that come from an authority you trust and just believe it without evidence, that creates a massive vulnerability in our American minds that the GOP hacked into.
Mm.
And they figured out, oh, we can tell these people anything. And as long as they trust the person saying it, they're going to believe it. And so this is where, like I said before, it comes down to epistemology. How do you get your truth? And I think that if you were to divide the left and the right in this country, the religious and the non-religious, liberal, however you wanted to define them, one of the major splits is going to come down to epistemology. Like, how do they consider a claim before deciding to believe it? That separates the sheep from the goats, basically, right? The liberals from the conservatives, and the conservatives, unfortunately, will believe things on faith. And so that's where religion has completely contaminated our political system.
Clearly, because like I said, we keep going. Trump says it's got to be true. He's
Right.
the most dishonest person I've ever seen. I can ever think of in history, maybe. Like, I've never seen that guy. The truth means nothing to him, but everything
Nope.
he is gospel. He's orange Jesus.
Yeah, luckily, though, his sheen is wearing off, I think. I think a lot of previous Trump supporters are starting to back away. I think they're sick of it because it's too much cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
So that's hopefully it's going to fix itself in the near future.
Well, I mean, I hope so. We can't go on much more like this.
Nope.
It's been really terrible. But it doesn't look like the evangelicals are jumping off the Trump train, though, does it?
I think that little by little, I think they are. I think I'm starting to see a lot of people who previously were MAGA saying, I'm not MAGA anymore. And they're, I don't believe you, I don't agree with you liberals, but I'm sorry that I voted for Trump. They're saying stuff like that a lot.
Yeah, you're seeing that. I agree. It's like I discussed when I had Mike Rothschild on my very first episode. Him and I said is like, once he's gone, it's going to be like Germany in May of 1945. Never voted for him.
Right.
I never supported
Everyone
him.
will have always been against this.
Yes. And that's what we're going to see. I mean, that's going to happen.
Yeah, totally.
We can't. Yeah, it's just it's become too taxing now. And you just laugh like the time like he went out in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protest and holding the Bible upside down and
Oh,
backwards.
man, that was classic.
It's
and
like
then he said 2 Corinthians. Oh,
yeah.
that was a tell right there.
Or my favorite, remember when he was first running too, and they asked him if he liked the Old Testament or New Testament more, and he's like, I like them both. I like them
Like
both.
the Old Testament or the New Testament more?
And they're like, well, is there any specific scripture passage or you like? And he's like, they're all great.
They're all great.
They're
Especially the ones that talk about me.
exactly. And they're all about me. Well, so now let's get to the third act of you, James. Okay. Let's talk deconversion and escaping the mental framework that organized religion puts on people. Because it's not easy. I wish we had more deprogramming camps like these people have gay conversion camps. I wish we had that. Can we get more of these up going? So, like, why is leaving Christianity so psychologically difficult? What makes it so hard to, like, get out of that grasp of Jesus? And hey, like some of the, I don't believe Jesus was an historical person. Like, the stuff they attribute to him, he says some nice things, help the poor, help the sick. There's some good stuff. But so you sit those, but why? So I'm not throwing it all on Jesus. We'll step it up to the God level. But so why is leaving Christianity so psychologically difficult?
Well, remember before when I was talking about memetics and how the really sticky ideas are what have been carried along through the years. And every micro society in the United States has their own slightly variant idea of what Christianity is. And it's meant to be stickier for the people who live in that area. Right? Evolved over 2,000 years to be a religion that is very, very difficult to leave. That's why Christianity survived and all the other variants of religions didn't. And that's why Islam survived too. They have very similar aspects to them. And so if as an adult you realize, man, everything I believe is a crock of bull, which is what happened to me, the process of leaving your faith is a total ego death. And it's a profoundly difficult thing to go through, because if you imagine your mind like a mountain, and then all the events and all the stuff that you experience is the rain falling on the mountain, right? That water has to find a way down the mountain, right? We have to figure out a way to process our reality. And for years and years and years while you were a Christian, you were trained to process reality a certain way so that water would go down the mountain a certain way. And then it carves a groove into the mountain and big ravines, right? So the water is going to want to go, your thoughts are going to want to go in that same direction. Our brains are lazy. Even though you say, I'm no longer a Christian, your brain is still a Christian. It's still shaped like a Christian and it still acts like a Christian because that's how it learned to process thoughts for all those years. So changing the way you think is about as hard as it sounds as it would be to change the way the water goes down the mountain. It requires a lot of work and gardening and digging, and like you have to really do some work. And in my book, I get into a lot of the ways about how you do that through metacognition and paying attention to your own thoughts and actively rewriting those thoughts so that the water basically goes down the mountain a different way. Some things, though, are even to me. I've been a non-Christian now for 30 years, and it's still, I still have to do it. I still find myself feeling like I don't deserve things, right, and that I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
So I still have to do it. But I'm a much, much happier person years and years later and years of therapy later. But it's a huge ordeal to leave your faith, most definitely.
I imagine, and I think of all things, that's probably the hardest thing to disconnect is from religion.
Yeah.
You're throwing your whole belief system down the toilet, and it's like I said, it's very fragile as it is, because you don't really have any evidence to back any of it up. Literally nothing, zero.
Right. That's why it takes an ego death to get out of it, because your own ego and your pride and saying, this has got to be right. It's been reinforcing that.
Because most people just don't want to be wrong. And I mean, it throws it all up. It's like, all right. So, and a lot of it, I think, too, is, it's the fear-based thing that we discussed earlier. But a lot of it's like people are afraid of dying. Like, oh, if you just die, that's it. There's no eternal life. Then when I talk to people that have lived over, like, been 100 years old, they're like, oh, I hope there's no eternal life. I have. There's so many, like, people I met that are, like, in their 90s or under, like, they're like, oh, I'm ready. I'm done.
Oh, yeah.
If I have to do this forever.
That's great.
Which just seems crazy to me anyway. I mean, there's just, I don't know. To me, it just never made sense from when I was a kid. I was like, none of this makes any sense at all. It doesn't. So, so what myths, speaking of that, which one of these myths do you think is the hardest to unlearn?
Well, one of them is what we were just speaking to, is the myth that I'm right? The Christian identity is one that is extremely arrogant and confident in their faith, right? Or that's what they purport. That's the mask that they wear, is this confident, arrogant, I know I'm right, Jesus is king, blah, blah, blah. And so being wrong is not part of their identity. I am an evidence-based thinker. Being wrong is part of my identity. So when I'm wrong, it doesn't take a whole ego death. I just be like, oh, wow, I learned something. I really thought that something, this was true. And now I'm realizing it's not true. I learn stuff every day. I find out I was wrong about something because it's part of my identity. And so that's probably one of the biggest myths that Christians have to get over, is that you were wrong. Not only were you wrong, being wrong made you kind of an asshole, because of how you acted and how you talked to people and how you told other people stuff that was wrong. That's a very hard thing to get over, right?
And some of it, like you said, that Bible, it's some scary rhetoric in that book.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a regret that they have to face, right? Did I waste all these years of my life believing a lie?
Yeah.
Did I, like, all the things I could have done, all the fun I could have had, all the sins I could have committed if I had known that none of this was a sin? They don't want to, that's like too big of a thing to face for people. So that's a gigantic fear that they have to overcome in order to leave their faith. That probably is one of the biggest ones. But probably close behind that is hell. The fear of hell is like, and it's not even in the Bible, by the way. Hell is mentioned by 5 different names in the Bible and 5 different descriptions, but the Bible is really not sure what hell is, right? Dante was very sure what hell was.
Sure, but yes. Yep.
And so the vision that we have of hell is what Dante Alighieri wrote, like centuries after the Bible was written. So yeah, hell is the biggest fear, right? Being separated from God and eternal torment, being tortured forever. Nobody deserves that. It's a controversial thing to say, but eternal torture, maybe, a few billion years for that guy, but eternal torture, nobody deserves that, right? And so, like, what kind of a just God would do that to anybody? Anyway, hell is the biggest fear that Christians have to overcome in order to leave their faith. They have to realize that it's bullshit. There's a really good book, by the way, by a lady named Alice K. Turner, called The History of Hell. I highly recommend anybody who has the fear of hell read that book. It will.
We can put a link in. We could put a link into it.
It's an old book. I read it a long time ago, and I had the fear of hell when I deconverted from my faith. And I read that book, and boom, no more fear of hell. Because I realized this is complete fiction.
It's, like conversation you and I had off camera was, Lord Raglan's Hero book that came out in the mid-30s was such an enlightening book. I was like, he broke it down. He took every great mythical hero in history, Perseus, Hercules, Jesus, and, gave him that hero score, all the different criteria. And I laughed. It's like, oh yeah, Jesus and Perseus were like basically like the same person. Well, except he didn't get a Pegasus, or was that just in Clash of the Titans? I'm not sure.
They should have given Jesus a Pegasus.
That would have made him cooler, right? A flying horse. Well, speaking of cool, they're always trying to make it cooler too. Is like one of my favorite all-time lines about Christianity was on King of the Hill, and Bobby Hill was going and getting into like Christian rock, and Hank Hill confronts the band and goes, He goes, look, he goes, you're not making Christianity any cooler, and you're making rock and roll worse. I fell over laughing.
I saw that episode and I laughed so hard. Oh my God.
That's such a great
Oh
line.
man.
And speaking of other obsessions I have, like The Simpsons, like after the Homer where Homer quits going to church, and I noticed I started after I saw that episode, that was like the early mid-90s. Anytime someone I don't know is knocking on my door, I answer it the same way as him. I'm like, this isn't going to be about Jesus, is it?
Oh man. All right. Well, we're listing out the myths that are hardest to unlearn.
Yeah.
Fear that you're never wrong is the number one thing. Fear of hell is number two. And I think right behind that is going to be fear of your family's reaction. And if you're a little kid, that could be like fatal. So if you're under 18 or still dependent on your family, by the way, I do not recommend you tell your family that you no longer believe. And also losing all of your friends, your whole tribe is going to abandon you. When I became a non-Christian at 33, my whole tribe abandoned me.
Everyone.
All of my friends. Yep. There were two of my friends who did not abandon me and they stayed my friends, but all the other ones were gone and like would consciously not speak to me. And I wasn't even like a Jehovah's Witness. That's what they do in Jehovah's Witness. I was just a regular old charismatic Christian. Then the next fear would be changing identities. Christians are constantly conditioned to believe that people who are not Christians are like one of them, knuckle-dragging sinners who just are like these horrible people and liberals and like woke people, right? They have these pejoratives that they put on non-Christians. And good grief, I don't want to become one of those people, right? That's actually a fear that a lot of Christians have that I think the rest of us don't think about, but they have it. And then the last one might be legit thing where they're gonna fear losing that relationship that they had with that abstract God in their head, right?
Yeah.
Jesus, whatever they want to call it. And what that is in their head is their own superego, right? It's an ideal form of them that they just project in their head. And I tell people when I've counseled them who, after they've become non-Christians, I said, you don't have to stop talking to that person. You just have to rename them. It's you.
I did. Godzilla.
It's been you all along.
My God is Godzilla. I always just pretend I'm talking to Godzilla. Yeah.
Whenever I sneeze, my wife says, Godzilla.
Exactly.
So
one closing question for you. So how does religious thinking mirror conspiracy thinking? Because I talk about this a lot on the show, and it's the one reason I've used Bigfoot as in all these cryptids as kind of a driving force behind it, because if you believe in them or not, I find them harmless. The Bigfoot people search for Bigfoot, they seem like lovely, nice people, but they're not on a crusade to harm anyone. They're just looking for their cryptid.
Yeah, I have an insider story about that, by the way. One of my previous bosses, a very good guy who was very honest, and I don't think he was bullshitting me. He told me that when he was a little boy, he went up to Northern California and went camping with his dad and his dad's friend. I think his dad's friend was Ray Wallace, one of the big Bigfoot guys up there.
Yeah.
And he woke up in the middle of the night around the campfire, and his dad and his dad's friend were awake, and they were putting these big snowshoe Bigfoot feet on and running around the forest and giggling. And then the next day, they discovered some Bigfoot footprints.
Oh, that's funny. I've heard stories like that. There's definitely stories like that.
So, yeah.
Nat Geo did
kind of harmless fun in a way, yeah.
Yeah, these are myths, and if you believe, you believe. But it's like I said, if you're believing in that, I just don't see any harm in those things. It's
Loch Ness Monster,
it's these conspiracies. Yeah, but like these conspiracy theories, religion, they got a body count on them.
They do.
Yeah.
And they're escalating degrees of harm that they do to our society, and it escalates up to religion, which is like basically the highest form of a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I agree.
People choose to believe a conspiracy for all kinds of weird reasons. They might already be a social reject, and they might need to create an identifiable reason why they're a social reject, because they can't figure out why they're a social reject. So I'm a flat earther. That's why nobody likes me, right? And so it gives them an excuse to be a reject. And it makes them feel like they're on the insider knowledge, and it also can make them part of a tribe, right? If you believe if you're a UFO person, then you get this like little community of people that you can chill out with and look for UFOs with. But religion is like the highest form of that. It put it on steroids, and then it's a religion, right?
Yeah.
So they're
having a hard time too. You're looking, the numbers are declining. Like, kids just don't care about it anymore.
In this country, numbers have been declining.
In Europe,
1% a year for 26 years.
Yeah. Yep.
Ever since the birth of the internet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Woohoo, internet.
Yeah.
Yay. It gives us more time to search for Bigfoot. Use their time wisely.
Right.
Well, James, we're coming to a close here. Do you have any last thoughts you want to throw in?
Not really. I think we've covered so much of it. I could talk forever about this stuff, but
we'll come up with something else, and we'll do one maybe later in the summer or something.
Okay. Happy to.
Sound like fun?
You bet.
Well, thanks for coming on, James.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Christianity isn't just a belief system. It's a training program. And like any training program installed early, it shapes how people think about authority, obedience, fear, and truth long after belief fades. Bigfoot myths are fun campfire stories. Religious myths come with homework, surveillance, and consequences. And if faith were truly a choice, it would need to start before you could read. Well, thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you next week.